I still remember the night I met Sasha Belmont like it's burned into my brain, a moment that flipped my whole life upside down. My name's Marcus Reed, a software engineer from a quiet little suburb outside Chicago, the kind of place where people mow their lawns on Sundays and wave at strangers. 4 years ago, I was at this tech conference in San Francisco, surrounded by guys like me, nerds in hoodies tapping away at laptops, chasing the next big idea. I wasn't expecting much, just there to hear some talks and maybe network a little. Then she walked in. Sasha. She was like something out of a movie, tall, with this sharp, confident way of moving, her dark hair catching the light just right. She was giving a presentation on some fancy AI startup her dad's company was funding, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. Her voice was smooth, her jokes landed, and when she smiled, it felt like the room lit up. I'm not the type to get flustered, but damn, she had me hooked. After her talk, I worked up the nerve to say something. I found her by the bar, sipping a drink, surrounded by a crowd of suits kissing her ass. I'm not smooth, never have been, but I figured I'd take a shot. Nice talk, I said, keeping it simple, my hands stuffed in my pockets so she wouldn't see them shake. She turned, looked me up and down, and grinned, like she knew something I didn't. Thanks, she said, but I bet you've got questions. Everyone does. That's how it started. We ended up talking for hours, ditching the conference noise for a quiet corner with cheap wine and stale pretzels. She asked about my job, coding apps for small businesses, nothing flashy, and I asked about hers, which was all Silicon Valley glitz. She laughed at my dumb jokes, leaned in close when I rambled about debugging code, and by the end of the night, I had her number scribbled on a napkin. Me, Marcus Reed, the guy who grew up fixing his mom's old PC, had just scored a date with Sasha Belmont, daughter of a tech tycoon. It felt unreal, like I'd stumbled into someone else's story. We clicked, though really clicked. She had this way of making me feel like I mattered, like my quiet little life wasn't so small next to hers. We stayed up late that night, walking the city streets, her teasing me about my scuffed sneakers while I tried to keep up with her energy. I told her about my folks, dad a mechanic, mom a nurse, and she told me about hers, though she kept it vague, just hints of fancy houses and boardroom fights. I didn't care. She was electric, and I was all in. When I got back to my hotel, my buddy Jace was waiting up, sprawled on the couch with a beer. He's been my best friend since high school, a coder like me, but with a sharper edge, always skeptical of everything. You're dreaming, man, he said when I told him about Sasha. She's out of your league. Her world's all money and power. You're setting yourself up to get burned. I laughed him off, still buzzing from her smile. You're just jealous, I shot back, tossing a pillow at him. Maybe I should have listened, but right then, I didn't want to hear it. Sasha made me feel like I'd hit the jackpot, like I was finally the guy who gets the girl. I couldn't see the cracks yet, couldn't feel the ground shifting under me. That night, I fell asleep grinning, thinking I'd found something real. Looking back, I wonder how I missed the warning signs, how I let her charm blind me to the storm that was coming. But that's how it started, me and Sasha, and for a while, it was the best damn thing I'd ever known. Meeting Sasha's mom, Claudia Belmont, was like stepping into a freezer with no coat. I felt the chill right away, and it didn't let up. I'm Marcus Reed, still the same guy from that Chicago suburb, trying to keep my head above water in Sasha's shiny world. It was a few months after that tech conference, and things with Sasha were moving fast. We'd been texting nonstop, seeing each other whenever I could swing a trip to San Francisco or she could jet out to me. She started talking about me meeting her family, and I figured it was a good sign. She wasn't just playing around. So one weekend, she dragged me to her mom's place, this massive house up in the hills, all glass and sharp edges, the kind of spot that screams money. I pulled up in my beat-up Toyota, feeling like a fish flopping on dry land. But Sasha squeezed my hand and said, "Don't worry, Mom's just." Mom. That didn't help much. Claudia greeted me at the door, and I'll never forget that first look she gave me, her eyes narrowing just enough to let me know I didn't belong. She was tall like Sasha, with the same dark hair pulled back tight, but where Sasha's smile warmed me up, Claudia's felt like a knife. "Marcus, is it?" she said, shaking my hand with fingers so cold I almost flinched. "Come in, let's not stand here all day." Her voice was polite, but it dripped with something else, judgment, maybe. We sat in this huge living room, all white furniture and modern art I didn't get, and she started asking questions. "So, no family business," she said, sipping her tea, her lips curling like she'd tasted something sour. How refreshing. I told her about my folks, Dad fixing cars, Mom patching up patients, and she nodded, slow and deliberate. You built your career from scratch? How industrious, she added, and I caught the jab. Sasha laughed it off, nudging me with her elbow. She's just protective, she whispered, but it didn't feel protective. It felt like Claudia was sizing me up and finding me short. Then there was Theo, Sasha's best friend, who showed up halfway through. He's this quiet guy, a graphic designer with messy hair and a habit of staring at the floor. Sasha hugged him tight, and he gave me a nod, barely meeting my eyes. Theo's known me forever, she said, grinning, but he didn't say much, just sat there, picking at his nails while Claudia kept talking. She went on about Sasha's dad, Victor, and their tech empire, dropping names of CEOs and investors I'd only read about. I tried to keep up, tossing in a comment about coding, but Claudia cut me off with a tight smile. Yes, well, not everyone needs to understand the bigger picture, she said, and I felt my face heat up. Theo glanced at me then, quick and sharp, like he was trying to figure me out, but he didn't say a word. Sasha kept the mood light, joking about my adorable accent. Apparently, I say pop instead of soda wrong, but I could feel the tension. Claudia's eyes never softened, and every time she spoke, it was like she was reminding me I didn't fit. By the time we left, my stomach was in knots. Driving back to Sasha's apartment, I asked her, "Does your mom hate me, or what?" She rolled her eyes, leaning her head on my shoulder. She's just like that with everyone new. Give her time. I wanted to believe her. Sasha's love was this bright, steady thing, and I told myself it was enough to outweigh her mom's cold shoulder. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. Claudia's disdain stuck with me, like a splinter I couldn't dig out. And Theo, he was a puzzle too, all quiet and guarded, like he knew something I didn't. I pushed it aside, focusing on Sasha's laugh, her hand in mine. I figured I could handle a little frostiness if it meant keeping her. Looking back, I was wrong, dead wrong. That day was just the start, a taste of how far out of my depth I'd gotten. But right then, I was still dumb enough to think love could fix it all. I'll never forget the night Sasha proposed to me. It was like something out of a dream I didn't know I had. And I'm Marcus Reed, the guy who usually keeps both feet on the ground. We'd been together about a year, and things were great, even. I'd gotten used to flying out to San Francisco, crashing at her sleek downtown apartment, and dodging her mom's icy stares whenever Claudia popped by. That night, though, Sasha had something big planned. She told me to pack a bag and meet her at the marina, no questions. I showed up in my best jeans and a button-up, feeling a little out of place among the yachts bobbing in the water, their lights twinkling like stars. Sasha was waiting for me on this massive boat. Her idea of romance, she said, grinning wide as she pulled me on board. Trust me, she whispered, her eyes sparkling, and I did. I always did. The yacht took off into the bay, the city skyline shrinking behind us, and we sat on the deck with champagne she'd popped open herself. She was in this flowy dress, her hair whipping in the wind, and I couldn't stop staring. We talked about dumb stuff at first, my latest app project, her dad's newest boardroom drama, until she got quiet, real quiet. Then she pulled out a little box, flipped it open, and there was a ring inside. Not for her, for me. Marcus, she said, her voice steady, I want you to marry me. My brain short-circuited. I'm not the guy who gets proposed to on a yacht. I'm the guy who fixes bugs and code at 2 a.m. with a cold pizza. But there she was, waiting for an answer. I laughed, half from nerves, and said, yes, hell yes, pulling her into a kiss as the boat rocked under us. It felt wild, unreal, like I'd won some prize I didn't deserve. She slipped that ring on my finger, a simple band that felt heavy in the best way, and I was all in. But then came Claudia. The next day, Sasha called her mom to spill the news, and I could hear the shift through the phone. Claudia's voice went from fake sweet to commanding in seconds. She showed up at Sasha's place that afternoon, all business, announcing we'd have the wedding at the Fairmont Hotel. For 100 guests, she said, flipping through her tablet like it was a done deal. My planner's already on it. I blinked, trying to catch up. For 100? I was thinking maybe 50, tops, something small. Claudia didn't even look at me, just waved her hand. Nonsense. Sasha deserves the best, and I'll handle it. Sasha shrugged, smiling at me like it was no big deal. Mom's got a vision, she said, and I caved. I didn't want to fight, not when I was still buzzing from the proposal. But it stung. My idea of a quiet day with close friends got swallowed up by Claudia's grand plan. And Sasha didn't blink. That's when Jay started digging. He'd been quiet about Sasha lately, But after I told him about the engagement, he pulled me aside at our usual bar back in Chicago. "You sure about this, man?" he asked, nursing a beer. "I've heard stuff, rumors about her ex, Quinn. Some rich venture capitalist guy. People say they were tight, maybe still are." His words hit me like a punch, but I shook it off. "That's old news," I said, leaning back in my chair. "She picked me, not him." "You're just paranoid." Jace frowned, his jaw tight. "Maybe. But her mom's got her claws in this wedding. Whose idea was that?" I didn't have a good answer. I wanted to believe Sasha's love was all I needed, that Jace was just jealous of me finally getting something big. Still, Quinn's name stuck in my head, a little thorn I couldn't pull out. Claudia's grip was tightening too. Every detail of the wedding had her stamp on it, from the flowers to the guest list, and Sasha just nodded along. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was marrying her, not her mom. But looking back, I should have seen it. The trap was closing, and I was too swept up to notice. That yacht night was the peak, and everything after was me sliding into something I couldn't control. I'm Marcus Reed, and by now, I should have known something was off with Sasha, but love's a funny thing. It blinds you even when the signs are screaming in your face. We were months out from the wedding, knee-deep in Claudia's plans, and I was trying to keep up. I'd moved into Sasha's San Francisco apartment part-time, splitting my life between there and Chicago, coding remotely when I could. At first, it was fine. Sasha was busy with her startup, I was busy with my apps, and we'd crash together at night, laughing about dumb stuff like who ate the last slice of takeout pizza. But then things started shifting, slow at first, then faster than I could ignore. She'd get these late-night texts, her phone buzzing on the nightstand while she'd roll over and mutter, "Work stuff," before tapping out quick replies. I'd ask who it was, casual-like, and she'd wave it off. "Just the team, deadlines are crazy." I wanted to believe her, so I did. Then there were the work trips. She'd pack a bag, kiss me goodbye, and say she'd be gone a couple days, some meeting in LA or Seattle, always vague. "You know how it is," she'd say, flashing that smile that used to melt me. But the trips stretched longer. 2 days turned into 4, and her calls got shorter, her voice distracted. I'd sit there in her apartment, staring at the city lights through those big windows, feeling like a guest who'd overstayed. Theo started acting weird too. We'd have these awkward dinners. Me, Sasha, him, and he'd barely look at me, just poke at his food and mumble one-word answers. Once, I caught him staring at Sasha's phone when it lit up, his jaw tight. But he didn't say anything. Claudia was the worst, though. She'd drop by unannounced, always with some wedding update, and she'd mention Quinn way too often. "Oh, Quinn's investing in that new AI firm," she'd say, smirking at me over her coffee. "Such a sharp mind. You'd like him, Marcus." It felt like a jab, and Sasha never shut it down, just laughed and changed the subject. I couldn't shake it anymore. The doubts piled up. Texts, trips, Theo's silence, Claudia's smug little digs, and I needed answers. So I called Riley. He's an old college buddy, an ex-hacker who'd gone straight, sort of, and now ran a PI gig on the side. I met him at a dive bar in Oakland, away from Sasha's world, and laid it all out. "She's hiding something," I said, sliding him a beer. "I need to know." Riley's a blunt guy, short, stocky, with a buzz cut and a no-bullshit stare. "You sure you want this?" he asked, leaning forward. "Once I dig, there's no one digging." I nodded, my gut twisting. "Do it." A week later, he showed up at my hotel. Yeah, I'd started crashing there when Sasha was away, with a folder thick as my fist. "You're not gonna like this," he said, tossing it on the bed. I flipped it open, and there it was, proof. Hotel receipts from Sasha's work trips, all in cities Quinn happened to be in. Photos of them together, her laughing, him too close. Texts she'd sent him, calling me temporary, saying I was good for now, but not the long haul. My hands shook as I read it, my chest tight like someone had punched me. Riley didn't sugarcoat it. Her mom's in on it too, pushing them together. "Claudia's been meeting Quinn behind your back." I stared at the pages, the words blurring. Temporary. That's what I was to her. A placeholder, a prop in some game I didn't even know I was playing. I wanted to smash something, scream, drive to her place and confront her right then. But I didn't. I sat there, breathing hard, and started thinking. They thought I was clueless, some dumb groom that could string along. Fine. I'd let them think that for now. Riley clapped my shoulder. "What's the move, man?" I looked up, my jaw set. "I've got a plan," I said, voice steady. They're not gonna see it coming. Anger burned hot, but I kept it locked down. This wasn't over, not yet. I'm Marcus Reed, and the night before the wedding felt like walking a tightrope with no net. Every step deliberate, every breath heavy with what I knew was coming. The rehearsal dinner was Claudia's masterpiece, this over-the-top affair at some swanky San Francisco restaurant with chandeliers and waiters in bow ties. I stood there in a suit Sasha picked out, shaking hands with people I didn't know, all 400 of Claudia's closest friends milling around with drinks and fake smiles. Sasha was in her element, gliding through the crowd in a silver dress, laughing too loud, her arm hooked in mine like we were the perfect couple. But I saw it now, the cracks in her act, the way her eyes darted when I asked about her day, the way she clung to me like she was proving something. I played along, grinning back, nodding at her little jabs about my nerves. But inside, I was coiled tight, ready to spring. Claudia was everywhere, directing waiters, adjusting centerpieces, her voice cutting through the chatter like a whip. She pulled Sasha aside at one point, whispering something that made Sasha glance at me and smirk. I caught it, that smug little look, and it took everything not to react. What's so funny? I asked when Sasha came back, keeping my tone light. She brushed it off, resting her hand on my chest. Just wetting nerves, babe. Mom's being mom. It was a lie, smooth as glass, and I let it slide. I'd seen Riley's dossier, those texts, those photos, and I knew what they were up to. Claudia wanted me out, Sasha wanted Quinn, and they thought I'd just roll over. Not this time. I sipped my drink, smiled at her, and let them think I was the clueless groom they'd pegged me for. Jace was there too, my anchor in this sea of phonies. He'd flown in from Chicago, looking uncomfortable in a tie, and cornered me by the bar. "You're still doing this?" he asked, voice low, his eyes scanning the room. "After what Riley found?" "Man, both. Get out now." I shook my head, leaning close so no one'd hear. "I've got it handled," I said, tapping the pocket where I'd stashed my phone. "Tomorrow's gonna be a show. They won't know what hit him." Jace frowned, skeptical, but he knew me well enough to drop it. "Your funeral," he muttered, downing his beer. I didn't argue. He wasn't wrong to worry, but I wasn't running. Not yet. This was my shot, my way to take back what they'd stolen, my trust, my pride, my damn life. The night dragged on. Speeches, toasts, Claudia gushing about our Sasha like she was some saint. I stood up when it was my turn, glass in hand, and kept it short. "To Sasha," I said, looking right at her, "for making me feel like the luckiest guy alive." The room cooed. She beamed, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or just surprise I was still playing along. Claudia clapped, her smile tight, and I sat back down, my mind racing. Riley had everything ready, files synced to my phone, a hookup to the venue's AV system for tomorrow. I'd spent days planning this, running it through my head like code, debugging every weak spot. Sasha leaned over, kissing my cheek. "You're sweet," she whispered, and I nodded, my face a mask. Sweet wasn't the half of it. By the time we left, my nerves were electric. Sasha went home with Claudia to keep tradition, leaving me at the hotel alone. I paced the room, staring at the city lights, Riley's folders spread out on the bed. Photos of her with Quinn, receipts, those damn texts. Temporary, she'd called me. Claudia's meetings with him, pushing Sasha back to her ex like I was some glitch to fix. I could still hear Jace's voice, bold. But no, I wasn't built to run. I'd walk down that aisle tomorrow, look her in the eye, and blow it all up. They thought they'd trapped me, but I was the one setting the trap now. I lay down, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding but steady. This wasn't just revenge, it was me taking my life back, one calculated move at a time. I'm Marcus Reed, and the wedding day hit me like a freight train. Everything sharp, loud, and way too real. I woke up in that hotel room, the San Francisco skyline gray through the window, my suit hanging on the door like a ghost waiting to haunt me. My hands shook as I adjusted my tie in the mirror, the black fabric smooth under my fingers, but my mind was a storm. Riley's dossier sat on the dresser, a ticking bomb I'd rigged to blow at just the right moment. I'd barely slept, running the plan over and over, every word, every step, until it was muscle memory. Sasha thought she had me fooled, Claudia thought she'd won, but today was mine. I splashed water on my face, took a deep breath, and told myself to hold it together. This was it. The Fairmont Hotel was buzzing when I got there. All Claudia's doing, flowers everywhere, staff scurrying, Guests in fancy clothes sipping mimosas like it was a party already. I moved through it like a shadow, nodding at people I didn't know, my stomach a knot. Then Claudia found me in the groom's suite, a little room off the main hall where I was supposed to wait. She shut the door behind her, her heels clicking on the wood floor, and fixed me with that cold stare. "Marcus," she said, her voice low, sharp, "you'll always be second in her life. Know your place." It wasn't a warning, it was a command, like she was daring me to flinch. I didn't. I just looked back, steady as I could, and said, "Good to know." She smirked, thinking she'd rattled me, but she had no idea what I was holding. Sasha came in right after, all bride-to-be glow in a white robe, her hair half done. "Mom giving you the pep talk?" she teased, smirking like it was a game. Claudia laughed, a brittle sound, and I grinned back, my pulse hammering but my face calm. "Yeah," I said, leaning against the wall. "She's just looking out for you." Sasha nodded, satisfied, and squeezed my arm. "She's the best. And you're not so bad yourself." Her eyes sparkled, but I saw through it now, the act, the lie. "Good," I said, my voice steel, "because I'm looking out for myself too." She blinked, thrown for a second, but laughed it off, turning to fix her makeup. Claudia shot me a look, suspicious, maybe, but they didn't push it. They thought I was still their puppet, strings intact. My heart was pounding, but I kept it locked down, every nerve on fire with what was coming. I left them there, stepping out to check the setup. Riley had slipped in earlier, a shadow in a hoodie, and synced everything to the venue's big screen photos, texts, the whole damn mess. I tested it on my phone, thumb hovering over the button, and it worked perfect. My hands were steady now, the nerves burning into something harder, resolve, maybe, or just plain anger. Jace met me in the hall, tugging at his tie like it was choking him. "You sure about this?" he asked, voice rough. "Once you hit play, no going back." I nodded, jaw tight. "I'm sure." He clapped my shoulder, a grim kind of respect in his eyes, and stepped back. "Then give him hell." The ceremony started, music swelling, guests piling in. I stood at the front, waiting, the officiant next to me droning about love and commitment while I watched the doors. Sasha came down the aisle, veil and all, her arm in Victor's. He'd shown up late, quiet as ever, avoiding Claudia's glare. She reached me, smiling like a queen, and I took her hand, my grip firm. The crowd hushed, the officiant started, but I was barely listening. My eyes flicked to the screen, blank for now, and I felt the weight of my phone in my pocket. Claudia sat in the front row, triumphant, thinking she'd pulled it off. Sasha squeezed my fingers, her perfume sharp in my nose, and I squeezed back, my pulse a drumbeat. They didn't know I'd rigged the whole damn thing, my counterstrike, locked and loaded, ready to rip their world apart. I stood there, calm as stone, waiting for my moment. I'm Marcus Reed, and standing at that altar with Sasha's hand in mine, I felt like a man holding a live wire, every second charged, every move deliberate. The Fairmont's grand hall was packed, 400 pairs of eyes on us, the air thick with flowers and expectation. Sasha looked perfect, her white dress glowing under the lights, her smile wide and practiced. Claudia sat in the front row, chin high, beaming like she'd orchestrated a masterpiece. The officiant was mid-sentence, some spiel about vows and forever, when I raised my hand. "One moment," I said, my voice cutting through the hush, steady as a blade. "I've got something to share." Sasha's grip tightened, her eyes flicking to mine, confused but still smug. Claudia leaned forward, brow creasing. I turned to the AV guy in the back, Riley's hookup, and nodded. The massive screen behind us flickered to life. It started slow, hotel receipts flashing up, dates and cities matching Sasha's work trips. Then the photos hit. Her and Quinn, laughing in a bar, his arm around her, her head on his shoulder. Gasps rippled through the crowd, a low buzz building. I kept my eyes on Sasha, watching her face drain of color, her lips parting like she couldn't breathe. The text came next, big and bold, her words to Quinn. "Marcus is temporary, he's good for now. Mom says you're the real deal." The room erupted, whispers turning to shouts. I leaned in close, my voice a whisper just for her. "I deserve better," I said, and her hands started shaking, the bouquet slipping in her grip. Claudia bolted up, her chair scraping, her face twisted with rage, but I didn't flinch. This was my moment, and I'd played it perfect. Sasha spun on me, eyes wild. "What the hell, Marcus?" she hissed, voice cracking. I stepped back, letting the screen do the talking, more photos, more proof. Every lie she'd fed me laid bare. The crowd was chaos now, people standing, pointing, some laughing, some horrified. Victor, her dad, sat stone still, his jaw tight, staring at Claudia like he'd known something was off all along. Sasha grabbed my arm, nails digging in. "You can't do this," she snapped, but I shook her off, calm as ice. "You did this," I said, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "You and your mom thought I'd just take it, huh?" Her mouth opened, but nothing came out, just a choked sound as she stared at the screen, Quinn's face smirking back at her. Claudia charged the altar, her heels pounding, her voice shrill. "This is a lie. A setup," she screamed, pointing at me like I was the villain. I met her glare, unflinching. "Tell that to the receipts," I said, crossing my arms. "Or the texts." "Your idea, right?" Pushing her back to Quinn. Her smugness shattered, her hands balling into fists, but she couldn't deny it, not with the evidence blasting for everyone to see. Guests were on their feet, phones out, recording the mess. Sasha sank onto the altar steps, her dress pooling around her, muttering, "No, no, no," like she could wish it away. I stood tall, my heart racing but my head clear. I'd walked her down that aisle, played the part, and now I'd flipped the script. They didn't see it coming, and that made it sweeter. The officiant tried to step in, stammering, "Folks, please, let's," but no one listened. Jace was in the aisle, grinning like a kid at a fireworks show, giving me a thumbs up. Riley slipped through the back, hoodie up, his work done. I looked out at the crowd, some shocked, some gleeful, and felt the weight lift. Sasha's betrayal, Claudia's games, all that time I'd spent doubting myself. It was out now, raw and real, and I wasn't the fool anymore. Sasha lifted her head, tears streaking her makeup, and croaked, "It's not real." But it was, and she knew it. I turned away, done with her, done with them. The screen looped, a relentless truth, and I let it burn. This wasn't just exposure. It was me taking back everything they'd tried to steal. I'm Marcus Reed, and the chaos at that altar was just the beginning. The room was a powder keg, and I'd lit the fuse. The screen kept looping Riley's evidence, Sasha and Quinn in all their smug glory, her texts mocking me, Claudia's fingerprints all over it. The Fairmont's Grand Hall was a mess of noise, guests shouting, some rushing the exits, others glued to their seats like it was a damn soap opera. Sasha was still on the steps, her dress crumpled, her face a wreck of mascara and panic, stammering, "It's not real," like she could talk her way out of it. Claudia was pacing, barking at the AV guy to shut it down, but he just shrugged. Riley locked it tight. I stood there, arms crossed, watching it all unfold, my pulse steady now that the truth was out. Then Theo stepped up, and everything kicked up a notch. He'd been in the back, quiet as always, but now he pushed through the crowd, his messy hair falling in his eyes, his voice tight, but clear. "It's true, Sasha," he said, stopping a few feet from her. "I knew about Quinn, and more." The room went dead silent for a split second, everyone leaning in. Sasha's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "Theo, shut up," she snapped, scrambling to her feet. But he didn't back down. "No," he said louder now. "You've been juggling guys for years, at least 3, some serious. I kept my mouth shut because you're my friend, but this?" He waved at the screen. "You're caught. Face it." My gut dropped. 3? I'd braced for Quinn, maybe a fling or 2, but 3? Serious ones. It hit me like a brick, the scale of her lies, and I just stared, trying to process it. Sasha lunged at him, her hands clawing, but Theo sidestepped, calm as stone. "Don't," he warned, and she froze, breathing hard. The crowd was buzzing again, phones up, catching every word. Claudia spun on me, her face red, charging like a bull. "You did this," she shrieked, jabbing a finger in my chest. I didn't move, didn't blink. Jace was there in a flash, stepping between us, his voice a growl. "She did this to herself," he said, nodding at Sasha. "Back off." Claudia recoiled, spitting mad, but she couldn't touch me, not with Jace looming and the truth blaring overhead. I looked at Theo, still standing there, his shoulders slumped but his jaw set. "Why now?" I asked, loud enough for him to hear. He met my eyes, steady. "You didn't deserve it," he said simply. "I should have said something sooner." Sasha sank back down, her hands in her hair, muttering, "Theo, you bastard." But it was weak, broken. The guests were a circus now, some yelling at her, some at me, some just gaping like they'd never seen drama this good. I felt the weight of it all. Quinn, these other guys, years of Sasha playing me like a pawn. My head spun, But I kept my feet planted, my face hard. Theo's confession wasn't just a nail in her coffin. It was a mirror, showing me how deep the betrayal ran. I thought I knew the worst, but this was a whole new level. Claudia tried rallying, shouting over the noise, "This is a misunderstanding." But no one bought it, not with Theo's words hanging heavy, not with the screen still flashing her daughter's secrets. I took a step back, letting it sink in. 3. At least 3. My chest tightened, but I didn't crack, not here, not now. Jace clapped my shoulder, his grin gone, replaced by something fiercer. "You okay, man?" he asked, low. I nodded, slow. "Yeah," I said, though I wasn't sure. Theo glanced at me again, a flicker of guilt in his eyes, but I didn't blame him, not really. He'd stayed quiet too long, sure, but he'd spoken up when it counted. Sasha was sobbing now, a mess of white fabric and ruined makeup, and Claudia was flailing, losing control. The room was theirs to drown in. I dropped the bomb, Theo had lit the aftermath, and I was still standing. That was enough for now. I'm Marcus Reed, and just when I thought the wedding couldn't get any wilder, the whole Belmont empire started crumbling right in front of me. The Fairmont's hall was already a madhouse, Sasha on the floor, Theo's bombshell about her 3 flings still echoing, Claudia yelling at anyone who'd listen, and that screen blasting her lies on repeat. I stood there, taking it in, my hands in my pockets, feeling the chaos like a storm I'd unleashed. Then the doors banged open, and this woman strode in tall, sharp, in a sleek black dress that cut through the crowd like a knife. She had a glare that could melt steel, and she marched straight to the front, stopping dead center. "I'm Isla," she announced, voice loud and clear, "and I've been Victor Belmont's mistress for 10 years. The room froze, a collective gasp sucking the air out. Victor, Sasha's dad, shot up from his seat, his face pale, his tie crooked from sitting quiet all day. "Isla, what the hell?" he barked, but she didn't flinch. "Tell them, Vic," she said, crossing her arms. "Tell them how Claudia's been screwing your boardroom rival for a decade, and you knew." My jaw dropped. "Claudia? An affair?" I glanced at her, expecting a denial, but she just stood there, mouth open, her hands trembling. Victor turned on her, his voice shaking with years of pin-up rage. "You thought I was blind, didn't you?" he roared. 10 years with that snake, and you parade around like you own us all." Claudia snapped back, venom dripping. "You're weak, Victor. You let her in." She jabbed a finger at Isla, who smirked, cool as ice. The guests were losing it, shouting, filming, some laughing like it was a damn circus. Sasha lifted her head, dazed, her voice small. "Mom, really?" she croaked, like she couldn't believe it. Claudia whirled on her, eyes blazing. "Don't you dare judge me, you little fool," she hissed. "Look at you, caught with your pants down." That's when Quinn burst in, shoving through the crowd, his slick hair mussed, his face frantic. "Sasha," he yelled, holding up his phone. "You texted me last night, begging me to stop this." He waved the screen, desperate messages from her, time-stamped hours ago. "Fix it, Quinn, he's ruining everything." The crowd gasped again, heads whipping between them. I almost laughed. Last night? While I was pacing my hotel room, she was still playing her game. Sasha stared at him, then at me, her eyes wide with panic. "No, she started, but Quinn cut her off. "It's over, Sasha. You're a mess." Claudia lunged at him, shrieking, "You useless idiot." But he dodged, backing toward the door. Isla stepped forward, her voice slicing through. "This family's a sham," she said, looking at Victor. "You let it rot, and I'm done hiding." Victor sank into his chair, head in his hands, muttering, "Enough, enough." The screen flickered, Riley's loop still going, but it didn't matter anymore. The Belmonts were imploding, piece by piece. Claudia turned on Sasha again, snarling, "You brought this on us." Sasha just shook her head, tears streaming, too broken to fight back. I watched it all, my chest tight but my head clear. This wasn't just about me anymore. Their whole world was collapsing, secrets spilling like blood. Guests were scrambling now, some bolting, some glued to the drama. Jace sidled up, voice low. "Holy crap, man, you didn't plan this part, did you?" I shook my head, almost grinning. "Nope. They did it to themselves." Theo was still there, watching quiet, his face grim. Quinn stormed out, muttering about cleaning up, and Isla followed, tossing a look at Victor like she'd won. Claudia stood alone, panting, her perfect mask shattered. Sasha crawled to her knees, reaching for me, but I stepped back. This was their mess, years of lies, affairs, double dealing, and I just pulled the first thread. The room was a war zone, and I was the only one still standing, watching their empire crash down. It wasn't my victory alone anymore. It was theirs to lose, and they were losing bad. I'm Marcus Reed, and by the time the dust settled in that Fairmont hall, I was done. Done with Sasha, done with the Belmonts, done with the whole damn circus. The place was a wreck, Sasha on her knees, her white dress stained with tears and shame, Claudia screaming at ghosts, Victor slumped like a broken man, and the guests buzzing like flies on a corpse. The screen still flickered with Riley's evidence, but it didn't matter anymore. Their secrets were out, their empire in pieces. Sasha looked up at me, her eyes red, her voice a desperate croak. "Marcus, we can fix this," she pleaded, reaching for my hand. I stared down at her, all that love I'd felt twisted into something cold and hard. I pulled the boutonniere off my jacket, some fancy flower Claudia had picked, and tossed it at her feet. "Wedding's off," I said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Enjoy the buffet." The crowd parted as I turned, a sea of stunned faces, some nodding, some gaping. I didn't care. I walked straight down the aisle, my step steady, my head high. Jace fell in beside me, clapping my shoulder hard. "You're a legend, man," he said, his grin back, fierce and proud. Theo caught up at the door, his voice quiet. "You did good, Marcus." "I'm sorry I didn't," I cut him off with a nod. "You spoke up. That's enough." He gave me a small smile, a real one, and I saw it then. He'd liked me all along, just stuck in Sasha's shadow. "Years later?" he asked, hesitant. "Yeah," I said, no rush, no pressure. "Why not?" Outside, the air hit me fresh and clean, the San Francisco fog rolling in like a reset. I didn't look back, not at the hotel, not at her. My phone buzzed, text from Riley. "News is already picking it up. Sasha's startup dumped her. Claudia's toast." I smirked, pocketing it. Their world was crashing fast. Sasha's company cut ties within hours, her brand toxic now. Claudia was ostracized, her social circle scattering like rats. Quinn? He'd moved on, some new girl on his arm by nightfall, typical slime. I didn't need to see it to know. They'd built their castle on sand, and I'd kicked it down. I headed to the airport. Sasha's credit card still linked to my phone from the honeymoon plans. Tokyo, a trip she'd bragged about. I didn't cancel it. Why should I? She owed me that much. I boarded the plane alone, settled into the seat, and watched the city shrink below me. In Tokyo, I checked into the hotel, her dime, and hit the streets, the neon lights buzzing, the noise drowning out the last echoes of her voice. I found a little bar, ordered sake, and sipped it slow, the warmth spreading through me. Free. That's what I felt, free and finally enough. No more chasing her approval, no more swallowing their crap. Just me, Marcus Reed, the guy who'd walked away with his head up. Back home, life shifted. Sasha tried calling once, a week later, her voice shaky on the voicemail. I messed up, I know, but I deleted it mid-sentence. No point. Theo texted now and then, and we grabbed those beers. Turns out he's solid, just took him a while to break loose. Jace kept crowing about the wedding takedown, already turning it into a story for the bar. Work picked up, my apps got some buzz, and I threw myself into it, coding late, building something real. Tokyo lingered in my head, that sake under the lights, a taste of what I could do on my own terms. Looking back, I don't regret it. Not the love, not the fight, not the exit. Sasha and Claudia thought they'd owned me, but I'd owned that moment. I'd stood up, said no, and walked out whole. The honeymoon wasn't some grand statement. It was just me, taking what I deserved, closing the book. Now, sitting here with a beer and a clear sky, I know I'm good. Better than good. I'm enough, and that's the triumph that matters.